Another week, another stack of medical bills I couldn't pay. I sat at my kitchen table in Portland, staring at the rehabilitation center's invoice, $250,000. The number blurred as tears filled my eyes. My son, Jason, had been in that wheelchair for 8 months since the drunk driver T-boned his car. The doctors said intensive therapy at the Cascade Rehabilitation Center could help him walk again, but our insurance had maxed out. I was 58 years old, a retired social worker living on a modest pension. I'd already sold everything of value: my late husband's watch, my mother's jewelry, even the car I'd driven for 15 years. Nothing came close to what Jason needed. My phone rang. Sarah, my former colleague from the Family Services office. "Diane, I know this will sound crazy," she said, her voice uncertain, "but I met someone at the hospital fundraiser last night, a man who overheard your situation. He wants to help." "I can't accept charity, Sarah. You know that." "It's not charity. It's a proposal. A business arrangement. He wants to meet you tomorrow at the Harbor View Cafe. 2 o'clock. His name is Victor Ashford. Just hear him out. Please." I almost said no. But then I looked at the physical therapy bills piling up on my counter. At the photo of Jason before the accident, standing strong and healthy at his college graduation. I'd spent my whole career helping families in crisis. Now I was the one who needed help, and pride wasn't going to save my son. The next afternoon, I arrived at the cafe early. The December wind off Casco Bay cut through my coat as I waited inside, ordering tea I didn't drink. At exactly 2 o'clock, a man walked in, and I knew immediately it was him. Victor Ashford looked to be in his early 50s, tall and lean, with graying dark hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. He wore an expensive charcoal suit, but what struck me was how he moved. Carefully, deliberately, like someone afraid of being seen too closely. He scanned the cafe, found me, and walked over. "Mrs. Morrison?" His voice was quiet, controlled. "Please, call me Diane." He sat across from me, keeping his hands in his lap. I noticed he wore leather gloves despite the cafe's warmth, and a dress shirt with cuffs that extended past his jacket sleeves, covering his wrists completely. "I'll be direct because I respect your time," he said. "I understand your son needs extensive rehabilitation. The Cascade Center, $250,000. How do you—" "I make it my business to know. I'm an architect, Mrs. Morrison. I design buildings all over New England. I have money, more than I need, and I have a problem that money alone can't solve." I waited, my tea growing cold between us. "I need a wife, not for love, not for companionship in the traditional sense. I need the appearance of stability. I'm bidding on a major civic project, the new Portland Arts Center. The selection committee is conservative, family-oriented. They've made it clear they prefer stable, married candidates. My reputation as a recluse is hurting my chances. You want to marry me for a building contract? I want to marry you so I can win a contract that will define my legacy. And in exchange, I'll pay for your son's entire treatment, all of it, plus a lump sum of $50,000 when we divorce after 1 year." The proposal was so cold, so transactional, I should have walked out. But I thought of Jason, only 24 years old, trapped in that wheelchair. The doctors said the window for optimal recovery was closing. Every month we delayed meant less chance he'd walk again. "Why me?" I asked. "You have an impeccable reputation. 30 years as a social worker, community volunteer, widowed, not divorced, no scandals. You're exactly the kind of person who makes someone like me look human." He said it without emotion, like he was describing architectural specifications. "This is insane." "Yes, but it's also practical. I have a large home in Cape Elizabeth, overlooking the ocean. You'd have your own suite of rooms. We'd maintain separate lives under one roof, appear together at necessary functions. After 12 months, we file for an amicable divorce. You leave with the $50,000 plus the knowledge that your son is walking again." I should have refused. Everything I'd ever believed about marriage, about love, about the sacred nature of commitment screamed at me to say no. But then I pictured Jason's face when the doctors told him he might never walk again, the way he'd tried to smile, to be brave for me. "I need to think about it." "Of course, but the committee makes their decision in 2 weeks. After that, the offer expires. He stood, and I noticed again how he moved, so carefully, like every gesture was rehearsed, like he was performing the role of a human rather than being one. "Mr. Ashford, why are you really doing this?" For just a moment, something flickered in his eyes. Pain, maybe, or loneliness, so deep it had become part of his architecture. "Because some of us are good at building things, Mrs. Morrison, but not at building lives." He left before I could respond. I told Jason everything that night at the hospital. He was in the day room, practicing transfers from his wheelchair to a regular chair, sweat on his forehead from the effort. "Mom, no, I won't let you do this. It's already decided. You'd marry a stranger? For me? I'd do far more than that for you, sweetheart. Besides, it's only a year. And it's just a business arrangement. It's selling yourself. It's saving you. There's a difference." I took his hand. "Jason, you're 24. You have your whole life ahead of you. I'm 58. I've lived my life. If this is what it takes, you deserve better than a fake marriage. And you deserve to walk at your own wedding someday, to play with your children, to climb mountains and dance at parties and do all the things that boy stole from you when he got behind the wheel drunk." My voice broke. "Let me do this. Please." He was crying now too. What if he's dangerous? What if? I've spent 30 years reading people, Jason. Victor Ashford isn't dangerous. He's damaged. There's a difference. 3 days later, I met with Victor's lawyer in a downtown office that overlooked the harbor. The contract was thorough, brutal in its clarity. Marriage term, 12 months. Divorce terms, amicable, no fault. Financial provisions, all medical costs for Jason Morrison, plus $50,000 cash settlement. Living arrangements, separate bedrooms, minimal personal interaction required. Public appearances, estimated 6 to 10 events over the year. "Any questions?" the lawyer asked. I had 1,000. But only one mattered. "When does he pay for my son's treatment?" "The day you sign the marriage certificate. The funds will be wired directly to Cascade Rehabilitation Center." I picked up the pen. We married the following Tuesday at City Hall. No guests, no flowers, no pretense of romance. Just two people signing papers while a bored clerk witnessed. Victor wore a dark suit and those same leather gloves. I wore a simple navy dress I'd had for years. When the clerk said we could kiss, Victor simply nodded at me instead. "Congratulations," the clerk said, clearly sensing something was off but too professional to comment. In the parking lot afterward, Victor handed me a key. "This is to the house. I'll be there most evenings after 6. There's a housekeeper, Mrs. Chen, 3 days a week. Your suite is on the 2nd floor, east wing. Mine is west wing. We live on opposite sides of the house?" It seemed simpler. "Mr. Ashford." "Victor. We're married now, Diane. First names seem appropriate. Victor, I know this is just business, but we should probably at least pretend to know each other. The committee you mentioned. I'll send you a biography. Facts about my career, my preferences, enough for small talk. You can do the same." He got into a black Mercedes and drove away, leaving me standing in the parking lot with a wedding ring on my finger and no idea what I'd actually agreed to. The house in Cape Elizabeth took my breath away. It sat on 3 acres overlooking the Atlantic, a stunning modern design of glass and stone that seemed to grow out of the rocky coastline. This was Victor's work, I realized. This was what a brilliant architect could create. Mrs. Chen, a kind-faced woman in her 60s, met me at the door. "Mrs. Ashford, welcome home." She said it warmly, like this was a real marriage, like I belonged here. "Please, call me Diane." "Mr. Ashford said you'd say that?" "He always knows." She led me through rooms that looked like magazine spreads. Everything was beautiful and sterile and precisely arranged. "Your suite is this way." He had it prepared specially. Said you'd need space to feel comfortable. My suite was larger than my entire former apartment. Bedroom, sitting room, private bathroom with a soaking tub that overlooked the ocean. The furniture was expensive but warm. Someone had even put fresh flowers on the dresser. "He's very thoughtful," I said carefully. Mrs. Chen's expression softened. "He is. People don't see it, but he is. He just has his ways, his rules." "What rules?" "Nothing bad. Just He's very private, needs his space. The whole West Wing is his, and he doesn't like anyone going there, especially the basement. That's his studio, where he works. He's very particular about that. I understand. And he doesn't like people to see. Well, he's self-conscious about his arms, always wears long sleeves, even in summer. I think maybe he has scars or something, but I've never asked. Not my business. A seed of curiosity planted itself in my mind. Scars? From what? When will I see him? Oh, he'll be home for dinner. He always has dinner at 7 sharp. Very punctual, Mr. Ashford. Dinner that first night was surreal. We sat at opposite ends of a table meant for 12, eating salmon that Mrs. Chen had prepared before she left. Victor still wore his gloves, still kept his shirt cuffs buttoned tight. The food is excellent, I said, trying to break the silence. Mrs. Chen is skilled. How long has she worked for you? 7 years. Another silence. I tried again. The house is beautiful. Did you design it yourself? Yes. Built it 10 years ago. It must be meaningful, living in your own creation. His fork paused halfway to his mouth. It's just a house, Diane. Walls and windows arranged functionally. But the way he said it, the slight catch in his voice, told me it was anything but just a house. Over the following weeks, I settled into the strange rhythm of our arrangement. I saw Victor mainly at dinner, occasionally at breakfast. We barely spoke beyond pleasantries. He left early for his office downtown, returned late. Some nights I heard him come home past midnight, heard his footsteps going down to the basement, staying there for hours. I focused on Jason. The treatment at Cascade was working. He called me daily with updates, his voice growing stronger, more hopeful. Mom, I stood today. With the parallel bars, but I stood. On my own legs. That's wonderful, sweetheart. It's because of you. Because of what you did. It's because you're strong. You're doing the work. But at night, alone in my beautiful prison of a suite, I wondered what I'd traded my integrity for. I'd helped hundreds of families over my career, but I'd always believed in doing things the right way, with dignity, with honesty. This marriage was a lie, and I was living it every day. The first time I saw something truly strange was 3 weeks into our marriage. I woke at 2 in the morning, thirsty, went downstairs for water. As I passed the basement door, I saw light seeping from beneath it, and I heard something that made me freeze. Crying. Not loud, not dramatic, but unmistakable. A man weeping, deep and broken. I stood there for a long moment, my hand raised to knock, to offer comfort the way I'd done for thousands of clients over 30 years. But something stopped me. Mrs. Chen's warning, his rules, the careful distance he maintained from everyone, including his legal wife. I went back upstairs, but I didn't sleep. I kept hearing that sound, the loneliest sound in the world. The next morning at breakfast, Victor looked tired, dark circles under his eyes, but his expression was as controlled as ever. "Did you sleep well?" I asked. "Fine, thank you. And you?" "Fine." We were both lying. Our first public appearance was a charity gala for the Portland Museum of Art. I wore a dress I'd bought specifically for the occasion, navy silk that Sarah had helped me choose. Victor picked me up in his study at 7, wearing a tuxedo that made him look like he belonged in a different era, a more elegant one. "You look nice," he said, and it sounded like he meant it. "Thank you. So do you." In the car, he briefed me like I was a business associate. "The committee will be there. Bernard Walsh and Patricia Kincaid specifically. They'll ask about us, how we met. Keep it vague but warm. How did we meet? In this version. Through mutual friends. We connected over shared interests in community development, married quietly because neither of us likes fanfare. That's actually close to the truth." He glanced at me. The best lies usually are. At the gala, Victor transformed. He was charming, engaging, telling stories about his projects with passion I'd never heard at home. He introduced me as my wife, Diane, with what sounded like pride. He even took my hand once when the committee members were nearby. His gloved hand was warm through the leather. Patricia Kincaid, a sharp-eyed woman in her 70s, cornered me at the bar. "You're a lucky woman, Mrs. Ashford. Victor is quite a catch." though I confess, we were all surprised when we heard he'd married. He's been such a private person since the tragedy. Tragedy? Her eyes widened slightly. Oh, I assumed you knew. His daughter. The fire. It was years ago, but these things. She trailed off, seeing my confusion. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have mentioned it. Please forget I said anything. But I couldn't forget. A daughter. A fire. Suddenly the scars Mrs. Chen mentioned made terrible sense. Suddenly the basement hours, the crying, the careful distance from human connection all clicked into place. When we got home that night, I stopped Victor before he could retreat to his wing. Patricia Kincaid mentioned your daughter. And a fire. His whole body went rigid. She had no right. I'm your wife. Even if this is just business, shouldn't I know? No. That's not part of our arrangement. My past is my own. Victor. Good night, Diane. He walked away, his footsteps echoing in the vast house. But now I couldn't stop wondering. Couldn't stop noticing things. The way he never lit the fireplace, even though Maine winters were brutal. The way he flinched when sirens passed outside. The way he sometimes stood at the windows staring at nothing, lost in memories I couldn't access. I started researching. Late at night on my laptop, I searched his name. Found articles about his architectural awards, his innovative designs, and then, buried in archives from 12 years ago, I found it. Architect's family dies in house fire. Designer injured saving daughter. The article was brief. A fire in Victor's home in Cumberland. His wife, Elizabeth, 34. His daughter, Maya, just 6 years old. Both dead. Victor had been pulled from the burning house by firefighters, suffering severe burns to his arms and chest while trying to reach Maya's bedroom. The house had been his design. I understood then. The guilt. The isolation. He blamed himself. Every time he looked at his scarred arms, he saw his failure. The house he'd built to keep his family safe had become their tomb. I closed my laptop, crying for a man I barely knew. For a little girl I'd never meet. For all the years Victor had spent punishing himself. The next morning, I didn't mention it. We went back to our routine, but I watched him differently now, saw the pain he carried so carefully, the way he designed buildings obsessively, perhaps trying to create what he'd failed to create before, safe spaces, escape routes. One Saturday afternoon in February, I was reading in the living room when I heard a crash from the basement. Loud. Then silence. "Victor?" I called. No answer. I went to the basement door, knocked. "Victor, are you all right?" Nothing. I tried the handle. Locked. My heart pounding. I remembered Mrs. Chen kept a spare key in the kitchen. I'd seen it once, labeled studio. I shouldn't have used it. I knew I was violating our agreement, his privacy, his carefully maintained boundaries. But what if he was hurt? What if he needed help? The basement stairs led down into darkness. I fumbled for the light switch, found it, the stairway illuminated, and I descended. What I found took my breath away. The basement was enormous, taking up the entire footprint of the house. But it wasn't a studio in the traditional sense. It was a workshop, a memorial, a shrine to guilt. Tables covered every surface, holding architectural models, dozens of them, houses of every size and style. But as I looked closer, I realized they were all versions of the same house. The house from the article. The house where his family had died. Each model showed different modifications. Extra windows here, a second staircase there. Fire suppression systems, emergency exits, escape routes marked in red. He'd been redesigning it for 12 years, finding new ways his family could have survived, new ways he could have saved them. And in the center of the room, surrounded by dozens of burning candles, Victor sat on the floor, his jacket off, his shirt sleeves rolled up for the first time since I'd known him. His arms were covered in scars. Not just scars, burn scars that twisted the skin from his wrists to his elbows and beyond. Shiny, discolored tissue that must have required years of painful treatment. He looked up at me, and his face was wet with tears. "I told you not to come down here. I heard a crash. I was worried. I knocked over a model. I'm fine." "You're not fine, Victor. You haven't been fine for 12 years. He stood up slowly, and I saw him consider rolling down his sleeves, hiding again. But maybe he was too tired. Maybe some part of him wanted to finally be seen. "They died because of me," he said quietly. "I designed that house. I thought I was so clever, so innovative. Open floor plan, minimal walls. It was beautiful. It won awards, and it killed them." The fire started in the kitchen. Electrical fault. By the time the smoke alarms went off, the whole first floor was engulfed. The open plan I was so proud of, it let the fire spread instantly. Elizabeth tried to get to Maya's room, but the stairs were already burning. I was in my home office, separated from them. I tried. His voice broke. I tried to reach them, but the firefighters pulled me out. They said I would have died, that it was too late, but I should have tried harder. I should have designed better. I should have... Stop. I walked toward him, slowly. "Victor, it wasn't your fault. I built the house. I created the conditions that killed them. You created a home, a place they loved. The fire was an accident, a tragic, terrible accident, but not your fault. Every house I design now, I obsess over fire safety. Multiple exits, firewalls, suppression systems. I've saved thousands of theoretical people, but I couldn't save the two that mattered." I reached out and took his hand. His scarred, damaged hand. He flinched but didn't pull away. "Is this why you needed a wife?" I asked gently. "Not just for the committee, but because you're so afraid of being close to anyone again that you had to make it a business transaction?" He didn't answer, but the tears on his face were answer enough. "Maya would be 18 now," he whispered. "Elizabeth would be 46. I think about them every day. Wonder what they'd look like. What they'd be doing. I come down here and I redesign this house over and over, and I know it's insane, I know they're gone, but if I can just find the right configuration, the right set of exits, maybe what? Maybe you can forgive yourself? Maybe I can sleep without seeing their faces in the flames." I pulled him into a hug, and for a moment he stood there, rigid and shocked. Then he collapsed against me, sobbing like I'd never heard anyone sob. 12 years of grief pouring out in the basement, surrounded by models of the house that haunted him. We stood there for a long time. When he finally pulled away, he looked exhausted but somehow lighter. "I'm sorry," he said. "This isn't what you signed up for. You should go. I'll be fine." "I'm not going anywhere." "Diane, we have 8 more months on this contract, Victor, and I'm not going to spend them pretending you're fine when you're clearly not. I was a social worker for 30 years. I know trauma when I see it. And I know that healing doesn't happen in isolation. I don't need healing. I need to finish this project, win the Arts Center commission. Then I can. What? Design more buildings full of escape routes you wish you'd built 12 years ago? When does it end, Victor? He sank back onto the floor, staring at the models. I don't know. I sat beside him, my 58-year-old knees protesting. We sat in silence for a long time, surrounded by candles and architectural ghosts. Tell me about them, I finally said. Elizabeth and Maya. Why? Because you haven't talked about them in 12 years, I'm guessing. Because they deserve to be remembered as people, not just as tragedy. Because maybe, I took a breath. Because I'm here, and I'm listening, and maybe that's what this marriage was really supposed to be about. Not business, but witness. Someone to finally see you. He was quiet for so long I thought he wouldn't answer. Then, slowly, he began to talk. Elizabeth was a teacher, 3rd grade. She loved terrible puns and made the world's worst coffee. She laughed at everything, even my most serious architectural lectures. She made me remember that buildings are for people, not just for awards. And Maya? His voice cracked. Maya wanted to be a ballerina, or a veterinarian, or both. She changed her mind every week. She had Elizabeth's laugh. She used to draw houses in crayon and give them to me, saying they were better than mine because they had rainbows. She was right, they were better. We talked for hours in that basement. He showed me every model, explained every modification, the grief and love in his voice as he described each potential escape route, each way he'd imagined saving them. It was heartbreaking and beautiful and completely futile. Finally, as dawn light started filtering through the small basement windows, I said, Victor, I need to tell you something about my son. Jason? He's doing well, isn't he? The reports from Cascade. He's doing wonderfully. He took his first unassisted steps last week, but that's not what I need to tell you. I took a breath. When Jason was in the hospital right after the accident, before we knew if he'd survive, he told me something. He said he'd been drinking that night too. Not much, just 2 beers, but enough that his judgment was impaired. Enough that maybe he could have swerved better, avoided the collision. The other driver was drunk, yes, but Jason blamed himself for not being completely sober, completely in control. I don't understand. I had to tell him the same thing I'm telling you now. That guilt is easy. Guilt is simple. It gives us the illusion of control. If we can just blame ourselves enough, punish ourselves enough, maybe we can retroactively change what happened. But we can't, Victor. No amount of guilt or redesigned houses or isolation will bring them back. Then what do? You live. You honor their memory by living. By creating beautiful buildings that make people happy, not just safe. By letting people close to you again. By forgiving yourself enough to sleep at night. I don't know how. Neither did Jason. Neither did I when my husband died. But we learned, day by day, with help. He looked at me then. Really looked at me for the first time since we'd met. This wasn't supposed to happen. This arrangement was supposed to be simple. Life is never simple, Victor. And people are never just transactions, no matter what we tell ourselves. Something shifted between us in that moment. We were still technically strangers bound by a business contract, but we'd seen each other's deepest wounds. And that changed everything. Over the following months, our marriage stopped being a performance. We had breakfast together, really talked. He told me about his projects, and I could hear the passion returning to his voice. Not just about safety features, but about beauty. About creating spaces where people could live, not just survive. I told him about Jason's progress, how he was walking with a cane now. How he'd started physical therapy school, wanting to help others the way he'd been helped. How he'd forgiven both himself and the drunk driver. Understanding that forgiveness wasn't about forgetting, but about not being enslaved to the past. He sounds wise, Victor said one morning. He learned from his mother, I said, smiling. Who learned from a brilliant architect who taught her that sometimes the strongest structures are the ones with room for change. Victor won the Arts Center commission. The committee called on a Tuesday in May, and he came home early with champagne. We celebrated in the kitchen, Mrs. Chen beaming as she served dinner. You did it, I said. We did it. None of this would have happened without you. So the arrangement served its purpose. He was quiet for a moment. Diane, we have 3 months left on our contract. I know. I don't want you to leave. My heart stopped. What? I know that wasn't the deal. I know you probably want to get away from this ridiculous situation, from me. But these past months, having you here, it's the first time since the fire that this house has felt like a home. The first time I've felt human. If you want to leave, I understand. I'll honor every term of our contract, but if there's any chance you'd consider staying. Victor. Not as a business arrangement. As a real marriage. If you could ever see me that way, I know I'm damaged. I know I have a long way to go, but I'd like to try. With you. I thought about everything we'd been through. The strange beginning. The slow revealing of our true selves. The nights in the basement, talking until dawn. The way he'd started smiling more, laughing sometimes at my stories from social work. The way I looked forward to breakfast now, to dinner, to the simple act of existing in the same space with someone who understood loss and survival. I'm 58 years old, I said. I'm not looking for a fairy tale romance. Neither am I. I'm looking for partnership, understanding, someone who sees my scars and doesn't flinch. I do see them, all of them. And I'd like to stay, not because of money or contracts or committees, but because somewhere in this bizarre arrangement, I fell in love with a man who builds houses full of exits but forgot to leave himself a way back to life. And I think maybe you've been my exit too. From loneliness. From defining myself only as a caretaker. From forgetting I'm allowed to have my own happiness. He kissed me then. Our first real kiss. 12 years after his last kiss, 5 months into a fake marriage. It was gentle and tentative and absolutely perfect. Mrs. Chen found us in the kitchen, still holding each other. She took one look and smiled. Finally, she muttered, walking away. We didn't tell anyone about the contract. We simply continued as husband and wife, but now without the careful distance. Victor still went to the basement sometimes, still worked on his models, but less often, and when he did, I went with him. We talked about Elizabeth and Maya, about my husband, Tom, about the people we'd lost and the people we'd become after losing them. Jason came home from Cascade in July, walking with only a slight limp and a cane for bad days. When he met Victor, he shook his hand and said, "Thank you for giving me my life back." "Your mother did that," Victor said. "I just paid for it. You gave her a life too. So I guess we're even." That August, Victor started designing something new, not a modification of his old house, a new house entirely. He showed me the plans one evening on the deck, overlooking the ocean. "It's for a family," he said. 3 bedrooms, open concept but with firewalls. Safety features, yes, but also joy. A breakfast nook with windows facing the sunrise, a reading corner, a play space, everything I should have designed 12 years ago, but with everything I've learned since. It's beautiful. I'm calling it the Maya House, a prototype. I want to design 100 of them, 1,000. Houses that are both safe and happy, that honor her memory by creating spaces where other children can grow up. She'd love that. I hope so. He took my hand. "Diane, I never thanked you properly." "For what?" "For breaking into my basement that night, for refusing to let me hide, for being exactly what I needed when I didn't even know I needed it. I think we saved each other, Victor. You needed someone to see your pain. I needed someone to remind me I'm more than just a caretaker, that I deserve care too." We renewed our vows in September, 1 year after our City Hall wedding, this time with guests, Sarah and her family, Mrs. Chen, Jason, walking down the aisle without his cane to give me away, and a photo of Maya and Elizabeth on the altar, because Victor insisted they should be there. "To the people who shape us," he said in his vows, "the ones we lose and the ones we find. Elizabeth and Maya taught me to love. Diane taught me to live again. I promise to honor both lessons for the rest of my days." "In my vows," I said, "I came here as a transaction. I stayed as a witness. I remain as a partner. Victor, you taught me that the strongest structures are the ones with room for change, that safety and beauty aren't opposites. That love can be found in the most unexpected places, even in the gaps between architectural plans and medical bills, and the careful distance 2 wounded people maintain until they're ready to heal." We had our reception in the house Victor built, the one he designed 10 years ago as a monument to isolation. But now it was filled with light and laughter and people. Now it was a home. Mrs. Chen cornered me at the reception. "I knew," she said, grinning. "From that first day, I knew you two would be good for each other." "How?" "Because you both had that look. Like you'd forgotten you were allowed to be happy. Takes one to find one, I guess." Jason danced with me to an old song Tom and I used to love. "Mom, are you really happy?" "I am, sweetheart. Surprisingly, completely happy. Even though it started as a business deal. Maybe especially because it started that way. We built something real from nothing but necessity and paperwork. That feels more honest somehow than all the romance and promises that don't last. You deserve this. You know that, right?" "I'm learning." Later that night, Victor and I stood on the deck, watching the Atlantic waves crash against the rocks. The same view I'd had from my window on that first day, when I felt like a prisoner in a gilded cage. "What are you thinking?" Victor asked. "I'm thinking that $5,000 doesn't seem like enough payment for finding your life partner." He laughed, the sound still surprising and wonderful to hear. "I'm thinking I severely undervalued the contract." We both did. Turns out some things are worth more than money can measure. Such as? Understanding. Witness. Someone who sees your scars and loves them because they're part of your story. Someone who helps you redesign not just houses, but your whole life. Someone who proves that it's never too late to start over, to forgive yourself, to let people in. Victor pulled me close. "Diane Morrison Ashford, I'm going to design you a house, just for you. What do you want in it?" "Large windows, lots of light, a studio where I can do volunteer counseling, space for Jason when he visits, and a library. A huge library, with a reading nook that faces the sunrise. And fire exits? Of course, but also something else. What? No locks on the interior doors, no barriers between rooms. A house designed for connection, not isolation. A house that says we're done hiding from life. A house that's safe, but also open. Just like we are now. He was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "That's the most beautiful architectural brief I've ever received. Will you build it? I'll spend the rest of my life building it. The house and the life that goes in it, with you." Standing there on the deck of his guilt-haunted, love-found home, I realized something. I'd come to Victor Ashford as a desperate mother willing to sell her integrity for her son's health. I'd stayed as a witness to his pain, someone to finally see him, but I remained as something neither of us had planned for. A partner, a love, a second chance. And maybe that was the most important thing I'd learned from 30 years helping families in crisis. That life is messy and rarely follows the plan. That the best outcomes often come from the most unlikely places. That sometimes you have to break the rules, even your own carefully constructed ones, to find what you really need. I married a reclusive architect for money. I expected to spend a year in quiet misery, paying a debt with my dignity. Instead, I found a broken man in a basement full of ghosts, and somehow we cobbled together something real from our shared understanding of loss and survival. The money paid for Jason's treatment. The contract gave us permission to be in each other's orbit. But it was the basement that saved us. That moment when Victor took off more than just his gloves, when he let me see not just his scars but his heart, when we both stopped performing and started being. Some people marry for love at first sight. We married for money and found love in the slow, painful work of healing together. And that, I think, is its own kind of miracle. The house Victor designs for us will be beautiful. I know it will. He's incapable of creating anything less. But it will also be real, practical, safe but open, built for connection, just like us. Just like the marriage we built from nothing but necessity and paperwork, and two wounded people who learned that sometimes the best foundations are the ones you construct brick by brick, scar by scar, day by day, together.